Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anthony Lebrano. Today, in the absence of Chair Mosser or Vice Chair Casey, we're in an unusual situation where we have to select a chair, and so I'm going to take a motion from the floor.
Mr. Lebrano, I make a motion that Anthony Lebrano stands as chair of this session.
Have a second?
I second that.
A discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. So it's an interesting set of circumstances that brings us here today. 9 trustees called for this meeting in the hope that we would address a resolution that was first offered at the November meeting of the Board of Trustees. As no doubt all of you know, that's not going to happen today, because in a moment, the Secretary of the Board will confirm that we do not have a quorum, thus we cannot move forward on this action. But that will not stop us from having a discussion today. So without any further ado, I'm going to ask the Secretary Poole to take the roll.
Barrett. Benson. Brown. Here. Casey. Corbett. Hotner. Gambley. Dandria. Duran. Dumasek. Eckel. Ferretti. Frazier. Goldstein. Here. Gregg. Harpster. Hintz. Huber. Jubelier. Here. Lord. Here. Lebrano.
Present.
Mosser. McCombie. Here. Meade. Olsey. Here. Peets. Pope. Here. Rakowicz. Rucci. Schaefer. Silvas. Telefero. Adam.
He said that he made the information.
We have 9 people present tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. So in the absence of a quorum, we can't move this resolution forward. I'd be less than candid with you if I said I was anything but disappointed at today's turnout. Those of us sitting here before you believe very strongly this is a matter that needs to be addressed in advance of the commencement of the suit, the trial, which right now I believe is set for January the 6th. I think each of us has something we'd like to share with you today, for those of you here, for those of you who are watching via live stream. I would at this moment ask Trustee Lord to share a few thoughts.
Good afternoon. Thank you. We're alive, right? Yeah. Well, what do you guys think of Lebrano's chair? I think he's feeling pretty good about it. So look, as Anthony mentioned, none of us are particularly happy about how this is playing out. Some gamesmanship and silliness, but it is an opportunity for us to talk. You won't have to wait 2 or 3 hours if you choose to talk. We're happy to listen, and we won't walk out if you start to talk. We'll listen to you. If we get accomplished anything, I'm going to try to help us regain perspective. I don't know if you guys ever do that for yourself with respect to where Penn State is, but I do it constantly, trying to remember where it is we are and where we're going, and the road we want to travel. So I'm going to try to relive some of that with you, and just you know, I mean, we're playing a little silly game today about who's here and who's not here. I mean, the fact is that there's not a game at play here. This is unbelievably serious business. The lives of any number of people have been virtually ruined. The university has been fleeced without millions of dollars, and the reputation of the university is still struggling to come back. So it's not a silly game. It's not about Robert's Rules of Order. It's about Penn State and the Penn State we know and love. We'll never finish because I've got really a lot of good stuff. So you have a table filled with your representatives. Scary part is this is the best you got. This is it, us. We may be in the minority, but we represent you. And we want to, why we're here today and why we've been here is to try to reconnect the university's glorious past, and I don't just mean glorious football occasions, but the university's reputation. We want to reconnect the past and the future. And we're in the middle of a 3-year hiatus right now, which is kind of a mess. We don't have the 35 seats that we normally have, but I think I counted when Tom went through the roll, 26 no answers. That's unfortunate. Because in order for us to reconnect the past, we have to undo the things that have been done over the last 3 years and continue to be done, ever since that fateful November 2011. We've got to undo the actions of what I would call I'll call them three bad actors. Bad actors being the Board of Trustees, including a board that includes us, the NCAA, who you've read about lately, and Louis Freeh. These are powerful people. They're able to behave more powerfully because they do it with university resources. And frankly, I think as the situation is evolving, it's getting more and more serious and potentially more ugly because the cornered rat syndrome will soon settle in because these are powerful people who are going to fight back. Penn State is a player in a long-running tragedy. It's not a tragedy unlike what just went on at the University of Virginia, or the Duke scandal, or any number of others. And we've seen 3 university administrations instantly assume that their own were guilty. That's what we saw. The other 2 have been largely already been proven innocent. Our battle drags on. The board and managers overreacted I believe, based on fear. Our board, in our case, and our managers, and the NCAA, and Louis Freeh, took Rahm Emanuel's advice even before Rahm Emanuel gave it. Exploit any crisis for one's own benefit. Let's consider the current situation. I'll look at the NCAA first. Their motives are obvious. They chose to use our crisis to solve their problems. They've got any number of problems. We've read about them. We've been reading about them for years. Their principal problem right now is they've got a long-term relevance issue. Fewer and fewer of us need them. And of course, we all know they are a too-weak enforcer. So they decided they were going to bring their brand of salvation to University Park and explain to us what good academic athletic relationships like. I guess they chose not to visit Chapel Hill or a few other places. They blessed us. They just had to get involved with Penn State. It was just too great an opportunity to pass up. Notwithstanding the fact that Sandusky's issues were criminal issues, not athletic issues, they chose to step in. Because it was a great opportunity for them to show something they don't normally show, and that's self-righteousness, moral resolve. And they demonstrated some toughness. Toughness that a gal by the name of Donna Shalel sort of laughed at when they applied it in Miami. Yeah, they demonstrated toughness. They took the perfect opportunity, decided to beat up on the new guy, Rod Erickson, just did his job. And they had a cooperating group of uninformed and, well, let's just use the word, simpering trustees. The only thing between Emmert and NCAA redemption were those trustees, and the trustees chose not to act. Emerging disclosures, day in and day out, demonstrate the NCAA's not only its disregard, but its actual total contempt for Penn State. And it's not really a surprise, is it? Remember, it's hard to be too critical. When the trustees themselves were confessing guilt, Penn State's guilt, and settling with victims, before any jury trial. And besides, the NCAA could act almost with impunity because they had the cover of the tough guy from the FBI. But the NCAA's own greed and arrogance took them a little too far. And they ran into a match, not here in the boardroom, unfortunately. They met their match in Senators Corman, Treasurer McCord, and Judge Covey. At this stage, I pray that the NCAA does not settle, that they allow their situation to go to trial so we can actually find out what's going on. I publicly ask Messrs. Corman, McCord to stay the course and listen to us. The NCAA owes Penn State a great deal more than the massive millions that they took from us. That's the NCAA. Now for Mr. Free. Louis Freeh's findings of course in quotes, indicted certain of our leaders and our entire university. His narrative, accepted by the board, accepted by the media, hook, line, and sinker. And why not? The board accepted the Freeh findings, hook, line, and sinker. Notwithstanding their protestations that they didn't really, they accepted a little bit, they didn't accept this or that. There has been zero, Z-E-R-O, pushback by the Board of Trustees on the Freeh report. It's been a sorry exhibition of what I would call self-flagellation. And now it's, what is it, December, we're closing on Christmas in 2014, 2.5 years later, and the beat goes on. Although the board minority finally won the right to review the Freeh documents. I understand that our general counsel's office and maybe our outside counsel are working on impediments to full release of those documents. But I can assure you this group here will overcome those impediments, and we will review those documents, and we will report to you. Soon you'll see Graham Spanier come forward with a suit against Louis Freeh for defamation. Louis Freeh's motives are a lot simpler, more basic than some of the other motives. He defamed Mr. Spanier, Mr. Paterno, and the university for $8.5 million. He performed his chore as requested. Mr. Freeh will learn that his business model is slightly defective. Monetizing federal judgeship and FBI credentials is not really a sustainable business model. That's what he's done. Mr. Freeh is a prosecutor, he's a lifelong prosecutor. He's not an investigator. Of course, Penn State knew that. They were interested in a prosecutor, and we bought a prosecutor. We didn't buy an investigator, we bought a prosecutor. And we got the prosecution we wanted. Mr. Freeh exhumed many facts. We were not short on facts. We had lots of facts. We had a shortage of relevant facts. His conclusion is basically 99% unconnected from the facts that are in the report. His conclusion was convenient for the board that authorized the $8.5 million. Several board members knew Jerry Sandusky way better than Graham Spanier, who didn't know him at all. Yet Freeh found only one board member culpable. Out of 35 board members, he found Graham Spanier culpable of all the board members. He effectively absolved, as he was paid, other members of the board of anything serious. And some governance issues, what I call checklist issues. But unlike Graham Spanier and the other defendants, at least till now, 3 years after the fact, Louis Freeh will have his day in court. And maybe just up the road in Belmont, Pennsylvania. Wouldn't that be nice? This trial should be local because it's this community that he's worked to destroy. I believe the litigation against free and against the NCAA that's ongoing will advance our position. The three litigants care very much about Penn State. Now speaking about the board. I've had 3 years to observe them, and 6 months I've been here and gotten to see them up close. As we're well aware, the majority is not in this room at the moment. It's a little symbolic, actually, because the majority is often absent, or they arrive just a little too late for things that are important. Several members of this board learned about Jerry Sandusky, but too late to do anything about it. The 2011 board knew, or at least learned grand jury findings about Jerry Sandusky's behavior. Too late to do anything. They knew the free report conclusions when the rest of us found them out. Too late to do anything about them. They learned the NCAA consent decree contents. Too late. So it doesn't really matter whether they're here physically or they're not. We'll get as much done at this board meeting as we get done at any other board meeting. The board's ignorance and its tardiness are some of their notable qualities, but they're also practice. They're not happenstance. The majority attempts to hide from the consequences of its follies, but it can't hide. Here we are today, a board that is on the wrong side of litigation involving the Commonwealth that we were created to serve, the Commonwealth that provides us some too small percentage of our revenues, but it's still better than zero. The same Commonwealth. Yeah, we're on the wrong side of that litigation. We're being essentially sued by the Commonwealth we serve. The Chairman Masters' answer to us as a board when we put forward this opportunity today to put ourselves on the other side of this case was, I think maybe we'll become truants and skip school. We won't show. No. You can always vote no, you can always argue your position, or you cannot show. So the general narrative, as I've heard it over a period of time, is that the 2011 board wasn't on it. It acted somewhat from fear and, to some extent, its own ineptitude in a crisis. And I think we see that, we see some of that still on the board, sometimes in large quantities. There are even less flattering personal traits at work in all of this. And as I observed the board today, and these will be far too general, there's a desire for self-preservation on the board, personal ambition, and I've seen and heard about retribution versus some of our former leaders. Got people that weren't particularly liked by the guys on the board who might have otherwise been the big dogs. But that's the way it goes, right? So I think litigation against NCAA and Louis Freeh is going to be productive. We still have a problem with this board. To call it dysfunctional is a little silly. Unless one recognizes that dysfunctional means it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and it doesn't work at all. When I joined the board, I knew that it would be an uphill fight, and that persuasion probably wasn't going to work, and that's been proven in a very large way. I had hoped the majority, certainly the longer-term members, would learn and leave the board over time, and some have, and some more will. There are responsible members, even in that group. But some won't. In fact, I've seen two of the 2011 guys just re-upped, remarkably. So this is not so easy to say, but I'd say that certain of our majority love power. They love the power that they can exercise in the majority. I think they like the fact that they can stay home today. You've seen the recent contortions that this board's gone through to reform itself, and what did it do? Look through all of it, and what did it do? It added to its majority. The majority is a self-sustaining entity, and it will do what it takes to stay in the majority. It is not at all unlike Washington politicians. You know, one thing one can say for Washington politicians is, even when they leave office, they will stay in Washington. They like it there. It's about themselves. The majority self-selects. It's an appointed board. It self-selects. Individuals in the groups are loyal to themselves first, the group second, and maybe Penn State third. These are my personal observations. They are surely not so in every single case, but I have very clearly observed this. So the business and industry guys like the business and industry guys, and they self-perpetuate. The ag guys like the ag guys. Okay, this board must change. This university is a great university, in spite of its board. It would be better served without anyone right now. This board began digging the sewer that we're in 2011, and we're still digging. We're still digging. You heard this. You heard the sort of joke that when you're in a hole, stop digging. It's even more true when you're in a sewer. Litigation may be the answer of the board, but I think legislation is the better means. This is probably I'm probably the last person you'd ever see saying maybe we need to turn to the government for help. We all know that when the government says, I'm the government, I'm here to help, that's not usually the case. But this is a very difficult situation we have at Penn State. We have passionate legislators and government officials who care about Penn State, care more than many in the majority. Mr. Udachek's on the phone. He's certainly as passionate as anybody I've met. Gorman, McCord, these are good guys. They care about this university. They self-identified as Penn Staters. Both Corman and Mr. Udachek have been engaged in governance and governance proposals for this university. I would say that they've been engaged in what I would call a modest way, and got the response that they got from our board recently for board reform now was to build a majority. They've been involved in board governance in a modest way. I will tell you, John and Mr. Corman, this board defies your efforts. It sits in abject defiance of your efforts. So I would ask you guys to think bigger when you think about reshaping this board. Again, I almost apologize. There are people that won't believe that I'm recommending government intervention. Ever. But I reluctantly surrender. We can't fix this board from inside. Self-government and governance has been a debacle. After 160 years of its existence, this board is failing. It's failing badly right now. And I recognize when one brings the government in, you're putting the fox in the henhouse. I expect that this fox will be a little less dangerous than the fox that's in there already. And that's where we come to at Penn State. I never thought it would happen, but I don't think, even if we have successful litigation against the creditors of this university, that after that, the board still has to manage this university, and we need for it to be better. We need Pennsylvanians who care about Penn State. The recent election showed that Pennsylvanians care about Penn State. There might have been one Democrat that won in the whole country in Pennsylvania because of the folly of Governor Court and his behavior around Penn State. Even Kathleen Kane, our Attorney General, rode Penn State into office. I would say for better or worse. The University and the Commonwealth have had an uneasy relationship. But we are a treasure for Pennsylvania. We are a treasure. I plead with Governor Wolf and with the legislature to engage with Penn State, with the board, with its leadership, and work with us. This is a great school. It doesn't need very much help, but the board needs massive restructuring. If I were to suggest one thing, I would say start over. Penn State has three major constituents: Pennsylvania citizens, Penn State alumni, and there's 600,000 strong, half in this state, and Penn State students. Penn State students and alumni are the same. The students are alumni in training. They'll be us. They'll be us. Today they're looking to the future. When they're alumni, they will look at Penn State's past. It's a dividing line. We hear that students who would wish we would stop worrying about the past and worry about the future. I'm with them 100%. I understand where they're coming from. We all were thinking about our futures when we were at Penn State. And in a year or 2 or 10, they will look at Penn State's past, not its future. We want the future and the past to be the same. So Pennsylvanians and our alumni and our students are our shareholders. If this were a public company, they'd be the ones that served on this board. And there would be little groups that pick themselves. They'd be selected. We know of boards that have as little as 8 people and 50 people. The right number is, God knows what the right number is. I don't think it's the number we got. We need Pennsylvanians and alumni as our shareholders and our board members who are interested in the school's reputation, its finances, and its alumni. Our alumni have given this school $3 billion. It's a couple of years worth of tuition. Our students give $1.5 billion a year. They're the ones that are invested in this school. They're invested in this school. And they're invested in this school not because they're farmers or because they're businessmen or they're whatever an industry guy is. We can have farmers and businessmen and housewives. We can even have lawyers on this board. We actually need one. But they should all seek the approval of our alumni. They should get elected. I just have to say that this self-selection doesn't work. It's unnecessary. And we have a big problem with this board. We're looking for common traits of love and loyalty for the university and for Pennsylvania. There's not enough of them on today's board. As I said, they tend to be loyal to their subgroup. So I will once again ask Mr. Dudicek to talk with his allies in Harrisburg and help us simplify this board and disentangle the current structure and the self-serving structure. And then I would ask you to do it wisely. So I know Anthony, even though he's our new, or at least our chairman for the day, didn't expect that to take this long, but too bad. Thank you.
And that's actually a good segue to asking the senator, if he's still on the phone, to share his thoughts. He and I have discussed a whole host of issues, but to say that I'm disappointed with the turnout today really is an understatement. This is truly a sad day in Penn State's history that we can't come together and have a conversation about such an important matter. Notwithstanding the fact that there's $60 million at issue with respect to the consent decree, there are a whole host of ancillary costs associated with that document as well. I know that some have criticized those here today, or most of us here today, as being singular in focus. I would suggest that that singularity is probably Probably it's the most important matter facing this university today because tangentially it impacts so many other areas of this institution. So John, do you have a few thoughts you want to add?
Thank you, Anthony. Let me first start by thanking our Lord for the kind words about government. Unexpected. Appreciate it. I do have a comment that I want to make and share for the record. And I do think Mr. Ward's comments are well made, and I am in agreement that our efforts on the legislative side have been modest and respectful in recognizing the unique relationship with the Commonwealth and Penn State University as a state-related university. Honesty perhaps was misconstrued by the current majority of the Board of Trustees, and there has been an outright defiance of what I think has been very professional and respectful suggestions from the legislature on board governance reform. But let me just make this statement, and I'll be happy to continue in the conversation in this forum that you've provided today, or answer any questions that you may have about next steps. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts on the two most pressing issues facing Penn State University: board governance reform and the university's refusal to join the Corman and McCord lawsuit against the NCAA. I applaud the trustees who initiated today's special meeting under the appropriate bylaws of the university for the purpose of passing a resolution that would make Penn State University a plaintiff in the litigation between Senator Jake Corman, Treasurer Rob McCord, and the NCAA. Regrettably, as a result of Chairman Keith Monster's unprecedented move to prevent a quorum from being present, we're not able to vote on the resolution. Separate from the merits of the resolution, which I fully support, the egregious actions of Chairman Monster point to a disturbing trend by the board majority to contravene the spirit of university bylaws and to stubbornly ignore long-standing state laws that prescribe membership on the Penn State Board of Trustees. As you all well know, Senator Corman and I have worked diligently to compromise on board governance reform through Senate Bill 1240 and subsequent efforts. The thrust of our reform efforts center on creating a smaller, more engaged board of trustees that reflects the vast majority of most major public research universities in the United States. Chairman Monster has rebuffed our legislative efforts in favor of a reform proposal that suits only the narrow agenda of his current majority by increasing the size of the board to 38 members. Ironically, when questioned why the full Board of Trustees was not informed by the about the NCAA consent decree, former President Rod Erickson noted under oath that the 32-member board was too large to gather for such a discussion. Mr. Erickson's admission that he did not inform the full board about the most significant decision facing Penn State in its history, a decision that has cost the university over $100 million and its hard-earned reputation, is an indictment of his weakness as president and an indictment of the structural deficiencies of the Penn State teams. Furthermore, the lack of disclosure before the full board is clear evidence that the consent decree should be legally challenged by the university, and the alumni trustees are justified in calling for the passage of a resolution that compels the university to join the worthy cause being led by Senator Corman and Treasurer McCord that challenges the validity of the NCAA actions against Penn State University. I'm proud to be an alumnus of Penn State. I'm proud to join the alumni trustees gathered in the room today who continue to confront matters of utmost importance to the public mission. I say that again, the public mission of Penn State University: effective governance, accountability, and the restoration of Penn State's reputation. Again, I'm happy to join your conversation and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, John.
Anthony, this is Trustee Olsey from the phone. May I get the floor for a couple minutes?
Yeah, before you do, I just want all of you to know that Trustee Olsey recently had a hip replaced, and as a result is unable to be with us today, but he hobbled to the phone so that he could join us. So go ahead, Bill.
Well, now that that's out in the open,
Well, you wanted me to disclose you had a health issue. I didn't want to tell him about the psychological one.
the good news is, well, I have a new hip. My backbone appears to be completely healthy and in great shape. And I do think that having backbone is an important quality when you're on the board of Penn State. I couldn't agree more with some of the things that Al said, some of the things that Senator Udacek has said. I just want to quickly say today that I do find it, and Senator Udacek touched on this, I do find it deeply disturbing that so many members of this board have not made the decision to participate in any way in today's meeting. And it's equally disturbing to me that Chairman Keith Foster directly and emphatically dissuaded members from attending the meeting today. By the way, in the executive session that we had previous to this, a meeting that included an informative and useful session with Council Dunham. Moreover, in his recent communication, Chair Mosser has suggested that this meeting and our focus on what many of us really believe is the most important fiduciary responsibility in front of this board is merely a distraction from more important issues that are facing Penn State. In fact, in a December 10th email to all of us, he says, and I'm now going to quote, "I continue to be concerned by the single-minded focus and the steady stream of resolutions that have required enormous amounts of trustee time spent on one issue and deflected attention from a wide range of vital university issues. I really have to say today, sorry, Mr. Foster, but I find your argument on this matter to be specious, inaccurate, and insulting to me and to many of my colleagues on this board. I'm not going to belabor what I'm about to tell you, but just to give a flavor for this, and this could be any of us reporting the same, I serve on 3 committees on this board: Business and Finance, Academic Affairs and Student Life, and Subcommittee on Building and Architecture. I was recently one of 3 trustees that helped the selection of the design and build partner that's going to work with us on the complete refurbishment and the modernization of East Hall, which is going to take over a dozen years and many, many millions of dollars. I've spent a lot of time in the last year making efforts with Trustee Harpster and others to refocus the entire agenda for the Academic Affairs and Student Life Committee on initiatives that are squarely aimed at the quality of teaching and learning outcomes at Penn State. Up until recently, as a lot of people know, this committee was spending time on God knows what, unimportant topics or unfocused. We're now really beginning to focus on the things that move the needle at Penn State. And I mean by that, faculty and student results and engagement, things like how much a degree at Penn State costs, things like what the return on investment on a Penn State degree is, things like measuring student outcomes and employability, time to degree metrics that Dr. Barron is talking about, student engagement, how our kids, learn outside the Penn State classroom, just to name a few. I'm one of a handful of trustees that's been asked to work on the Middle States accreditation process that we're going through right now. 140-page self-study evaluation and report. 2 or 3 of us are working with Vice Provost Bowen on that report to give feedback. I was selected as one of the trustees to serve on a special task force to review and improve Penn State's presidential selection process, something that, in my opinion, needs a lot of work. It was my initial recommendation to the governance committee that this task force be formed in the first place. And I recently met with a bunch of our student leaders, undergraduate and graduate, to talk to them about the new initiatives that they've got going on in terms of open source instructional materials, how open source content can be used in curriculum and coursework at Penn State. Business and finance, we're very heavily involved in the Hershey Medical School right now. All the M&A work is going on with Hershey Medical. I'm sure many of you have read about mental health system and some other projects. My point is, my engagement on this board is 110%, and I can tell you that that is exactly the same for all my alumni elected trustees. My attendance at all meetings and interim meetings and planning sessions and conference calls and everything else we do on this board has been 100%. I won't belabor other points, but I've visited 10 Penn State campus locations during my first year as a trustee. I've presided over 4 commencement ceremonies, as many of them have. Alumni Association events where I've been a key speaker, 2 Penn State Capitol days. One of the ones where I first met Senator Utachan, I think. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list, nor is it meant to be a list to blow my own accomplishments. My colleagues here today have similar lists, but I'm going through this to say emphatically that I do not feel the least bit distracted by the work at hand today, nor do I feel that I'm not spending enough time on other issues that face Penn State. The alumni elected trustees, and I think I can speak for all of us now, are tired of having people on our own board trying to frame our willingness to fight hard against the NCAA and protect our universities as a distraction. We're tired of being portrayed as people who are single-minded and don't have the best interest of the university at heart. We are tired of having the chair of this board insinuating that we don't care enough about the nearly 100,000 students that attend Penn State. You can disagree with us, if you like, in terms of our position on the NCAA, the consent decree, the free report, etc. But I want people to stop suggesting that we are somehow not doing our job as part of the effective governance of Penn State. Most of our alumni base at Penn State believe that it is those of you who disagree with us who are not participating in effective governance and not fulfilling your fiduciary obligations to Penn State. We're all in this governance job together, and we, the alumni elected trustees, are pulling more than our fair share of the weight. Disagree with us if you like, but stop disrespecting us. It is beneath you to do so, and I, for one, am sick and tired of it. Thank you, Trustee LeBron.
Trustee McClendon? Anybody else want to Trustee Jubileer?
Thank you, Anthony.
Hey, I just want to let you know I joined the call as well. Adam told me.
They're calling it. Thank you, Anthony, and let me, on behalf of 600,000 alumni, thank you, Anthony, for your leadership. I'm giving you a compliment. You can pay attention. And, honestly, without your leadership, I don't know where we'd be. And I think all of us appreciate it. I had the absolute privilege of serving in government for 32 years in Pennsylvania Senate, 26 of them in top leadership. And almost every one of those years, certainly when I was in the majority leader or president pro tem of the Senate, I've never had an instance when we couldn't sit down with people of different views and try and work things out or work it out with the government. It was always, we need to get this done. I want to tell you, this is one of the saddest days of my career to be here today. I almost walked out of here. As Al and Bill have said before me, we're here because we have a fiduciary responsibility to be here. I'm going to repeat that. We have a fiduciary responsibility to be here. Those who chose not to be here, in my judgment, have ignored their fiduciary responsibility. I ran on the platform of transparency and due process. That's what I believed in. I wanted to get the truth. I wanted to know exactly what happened, as you do, and why we ended up in the situation we did in one of the worst nightmares in college history. I wanted to find out how I could maybe make a contribution. Having left the Senate some 8 years ago and being involved in the private sector, I always wanted to, frankly, I always aspired to be on the board, but I always felt when I was in the Senate, it was a conflict of interest for me to do that since I was frankly helping to negotiate their budget. But when I got out, I thought to myself, this is maybe another way I can make a contribution. I hope I can make a difference. I'm not sure I am, but if I can't, I won't stay. I want to be able to make a difference. And today, I think it's one of the most disrespectful, arrogant things that I've ever had to do with people I, frankly, feel a sense of friendship with and collegiality. But today, my friends, for Chairman Master, who is our leader, so to speak, to say to any member of the Board of Trustees that the alumni trustees are going to call a special meeting, I'm not going, so you don't have to go if you don't want to either. You want to call that leadership? I call it irresponsibility, and I call it absolute arrogance. I'm sorry, Keith, but these alumni trustees have a heck of a lot to give. We gave during our college years, and we continue to give afterwards. And it's not just financial. It's support, it's love of a university, of a way of life, of a caring for something very special. I lived through the both the majority and minority sides of Republican and Democrat when I was in the Senate. I was fortunate to spend 26 of my years in the majority. But when I was in the minority, there was always a saying. The minority will have its say, and the majority will have its way. Today, my friends, all we've got left is a little bit of say. The majority won't even be here to take away a vote. We knew we were going to lose it, but the least they could do is come here, stand up for their constituency. I don't care whether it's agriculture or business industry. We are all trustees of Penn State University. We got here by a constituency that put us here. You should be here. We're seeing more and more about the truth coming out. I've talked to some pretty responsible people who have been involved in what's happening in the NCAA suit, McCormick McCord versus the NCAA, unfortunately, Penn State University. To have to sue your own university, pretty disgusting. But what's happening is it appears that there very well may be a break. I don't believe, frankly, that Dr. Emmer has told us the complete truth. I think there is reason to believe death penalty was never on the table. I think there's reason to believe that had there been a complete discussion with this Board of Trustees, whether there have been calls made, whether there have been some kind of some kind of involvement in this decision with the Board of Trustees, that very well it might not have been the way it's come out today. I believe that there's been a breach of contract on the consent decree. That if we are required to be a part of the consent decree as defendants, certainly with the emails that are coming out, with the allegations of bluffing, with the allegations of, and I don't know how anybody can disagree with the collusion between Louis Freeh and the NCAA and Penn State University. Kind of sad, isn't it? It doesn't make sense. And I believe that was a breach of contract. It was a perfect reason why Penn State University, proud as it once was and proud as it will always be in the future, should have stood up and said, we've had enough. We are out of here. We are no longer going to be defendants. We're going to stand for what we believe in, because why? We are. You're darn right we are. And it's about time we started acting like Penn State instead of being pushed around by a group of people who intimidated us, intimidated some of our leadership, bypassed the Board of Trustees, and didn't let us be Penn State. I know what we stand for. I know the pride that I have as an alumnus of this university and how much I care. I believe that things are going to begin to happen. I've talked with some of the, John Udicek and Jake Corman and Rob McCord and others have done a terrific job on the state level. Well, watch out for Charlie Dent and Tim Murphy in Congress, who are about to conduct hearings on the status of what Penn State has been doing as to whether they still should enjoy their tax exemption. Can you imagine what happens to the NCAA if the federal government gets involved and tells the NCAA you no longer have your tax exemption? Goodbye, NCAA, you're gone. So I think Al put it best. They tried to shine their image on our tail, and the things that we've had to pay for is pretty sad. So to all of you, I know we're all taking too darn much time, but to all of you, I just want you to know that this group will never, ever give up. Just like so many stories in American history, maybe a small group can make a difference. I'm very proud to stand with all of them and with all of you.
I know Trustee Pope had a few comments you wanted to share.
I do want to thank all of you who took the time to come here today and listen to us and talk with us. Your support means the world to us. I am sincerely sorry that our board will not have a discussion of the university's position on the NCAA case before the trial in January. It concerns me to think that some of my fellow trustees may believe that our motivations are frivolous. Therefore, I'd like to speak about what seems to me to be the difference in the underlying thought processes that contribute to the schism on this board, not with the intention of blaming or name-calling, but in an attempt to clarify what is separating us. I was not on the board at the time, but as it has been explained to me, the approach to managing the crisis took a page out of the corporate playbook. The board took responsibility for a set of problems they identified and took quick actions to show commitment to correcting the problems. Several individuals were removed from their posts and a number of compliance measures were rapidly implemented. Then they expected the matter to blow over fairly soon. A statement was made that by 2014, this will all be a distant memory. Perhaps that would have been true for a consumer product like Tylenol. But we are now approaching 2015 and we are still embroiled in this crisis. The reason for that is because a great number of people who love Penn State are dissatisfied with the approach that was taken. The trustees who designed the approach to managing the crisis seem to feel that if we would stop complaining, the crisis would indeed blow over, and therefore the solution is that we should stop complaining. Here's why we can't just walk away. I believe that much of the schism on this board comes from a difference in understanding of what constitutes fiduciary duty. Corporate boards serve stockholders. University boards serve stakeholders. There is a world of difference between these two approaches. Richard Chait is a Harvard Emeritus Professor of Education who's a national expert on higher education governance. In an interview published by the Association of Governing Boards, Dr. Chait was asked, what are the hallmarks of fiduciary behavior by college and university trustees? His response, fidelity to mission, integrity of operations, and conservation of core values. It is the conservation of core values that is a primary motivator for the alumni elected trustees. What are the core values of the Pennsylvania State University? I realize that the university's value statement has recently been revised, but for most of us, the values that have inspired us and have motivated us for many decades are simple: success with honor. That means excellence of scholarship, athletics, and service accomplished with integrity. We find the corporate approach to crisis management used in the Sandusky scandal to have sacrificed the university's core values in the following ways. First, we have not come to a full understanding of the complex factors that contributed to Sandusky's victimization of children. Because we have not, we cannot use this tragic experience to honor the victims by educating others about how to protect children in the future. Further, by accepting a poor version of the truth, we have acted in ways that are unworthy of a great institution of higher learning. Second, with the lawsuit under discussion today, we are permitting the NCAA to punish us in violation of their own rules and procedures, and in so doing, we accept their false claims about our culture, our values, which damage the reputation of a university previously known as a place where integrity was embraced. We also damage our relationship with the Commonwealth by not joining with them as they have requested on efforts to defend our university. Third, we sacrificed members of our own community for the purpose of expediency, without waiting to find out about their guilt or innocence, and without concern for the devastating impact on their lives. If we do not take steps to carefully address these problems, to protect the core values of the university, we will have failed in our fiduciary duty, our stewardship of our university. I recognize that there are individuals and entities who have been favorably impressed by the corporate approach of falling on the sword and moving quickly to implement a long list of compliance initiatives. But we must ask the question, who are we, and who do we want to be, and how do our actions support our highest aspirations? We are at a critical moment in the history of Penn State. I think it is fitting that we consider the challenge made by a former football coach at another critical moment in our history, the moment where the university was challenged to aspire to excellence in academics and to use a national football championship to accomplish that. Joe Paterno said, I think we are looking for the soul of this institution. The soul may be an overstatement, but I'm not sure I'm overstating the case. I think we're literally looking for a soul, who we are, what we are, and I think that basically comes down to soul. We need to find our soul. Our stewardship of our university is a sacred trust. We owe it to Penn State to come together to make sincere efforts to understand each other so we can chart the future of our university consistent with the values that have made it the jewel in the crown of higher education in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
And thanks everyone for being here. My remarks will be briefer. I just want to say that one of the few factual findings of the free report was that 3 trustees in positions of leadership on this board were told by then President Graham Spanier of the coming indictments of Tim Curley and Gary Schultz nearly a week ahead of time. They did not alert the rest of the board, and they did nothing to help to prepare the university for what was to happen. Recent governance reforms should have addressed this issue of the few making decisions for the board, but instead has already put that goal further out of reach. Given that we did not learn until after our last board meeting that the NCAA versus the state trial would start before we could formally meet again, I'm surprised the chairman himself did not call a meeting immediately to discuss such an important development. Instead, by failing to attend this board meeting to consider the Lobrano resolution in a more timely fashion, a de facto decision for the board and for the university has been made by a few that we should continue to stand with the NCAA and on the wrong side of history. It seems we have learned little from the governance failures of late 2011 and 2012, and like Bob, I find that really quite sad. Thank you.
I know Allie has a few words she wants to share. Let her share them from the floor.
I'm just going to do it from the microphone, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew from my words why I'm here today. I'm attending today because I live in State College. The semester's over, and I really want to be here to listen to what everyone has to say. So I will not be saying anything other than that today, other than just listening and saving my comment for future meetings when the full board is present.
Thank you, Allie. Ted, do you have something you want to add?
First, I want to say that every trustee meeting I've been to, I always wear a Penn State tie. Today, I do not have a Penn State tie on. I have a tie that represents 4 paintings done by Norman Rockwell. And the last one is a picture that depicts freedom of speech. So I'm happy today that I can speak freely to all of you. Bill earlier referenced an email that we got that the group of us are focused on one issue. But it didn't say what that one issue was. So I thought about, what is that one issue? Is it the NCAA sanctions that were unjustified? Is it the free report? Is it the 409 wins? Is it Joe's statute? Is it the paternal lawsuit? Is it the Corman lawsuit? Is it getting and keeping and maturing great faculty? Is it educating students? Well, it's all of those things, but that's a lot more than one. So it did occur to me that the email was right, that this group is focused on one issue, as universities have for hundreds of years, the truth. Thank you.
Before I formally adjourn this meeting, I came across a letter to the editor recently that I think is timely. It's entitled, "Yes, Facts Do Matter." Louis Freeh wrote a very interesting column in the December 11th Wall Street Journal titled "Senate Democrats and 9/11 Amnesia." In it, he critiques the Senate Intelligence Committee's report regarding the CIA and the use of enhanced interrogation techniques after the September 11, 2001 attacks. In an epic moment of irony, Freeh questions the validity of the report because the government personnel who approved the interrogation methods were never interviewed. He states that, and I quote, "Facts matter." And, quoting again, "The failure to interview the 3 CIA directors and 3 deputy directors or any other CIA employees constitute a glaring investigative lapse." He wonders how the report's writers could, and I quote, "make such crucial findings solely on the paper record without interviewing the critical players." Freeh's motto should be, "Do as I say, not as I do." In crafting the dubious report on the Jerry Sandusky scandal, Freeh interviewed none of the critical players, and he presented speculative conjecture as facts. The report was used to condemn 4 good men and created unwarranted NCAA sanctions. In the Wall Street Journal, Freeh outlines what constitutes good investigative methodology. Unfortunately, and for reasons that remain unknown, he ignored these best practices during his work for Penn State. The upcoming Board of Trustees meeting presents yet another opportunity for the trustees, all of them, to act in line with their fiduciary responsibility by siding with the truth and honesty. It's past time for the board to acknowledge that facts matter. When I arrived today, someone reminded me of something happened just a couple short years ago in Wisconsin. An epic piece of legislation that was being contemplated. And you might remember that any number of legislators got out of the state so that they couldn't hold a vote because there was no quorum. Ours might not be as important to them, but it's certainly important to us. And so with that, again, I want to thank all of you for being here today. Disappointment is the operative word. At the same time, though, I'm pleased that we could have all of you with us today, and certainly we'll stay for a while if some of you have any questions for us. So with that, Mr. Secretary, we're going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you again.
So did you expect the lack of a quorum today?
Yes.
And given that, considering that you wouldn't have a quorum, that you probably knew you wouldn't have a quorum, what do you hope to accomplish from this, for this meeting to have been a success?
Well, it was a great success. Senator Yudichak's participation, I think, added a dimension that we've not seen in previous board meetings.
In what way?
Well, you have a sitting state legislator who's actively engaged in issues that address or impact Penn State. I think you'll see Senator Yudichak, along with Senator Corman, much more active in the next session with respect to reform. So yeah, we knew in advance. So I'll be clear. We knew last week. I sent a letter to the chair on Monday, the 8th of December, and the chair responded late in the afternoon, early evening on Tuesday, requesting that we withdraw our request. And we responded late in the day on Wednesday and advised him that we thought this was too significant a matter to withdraw our request. And then he, of course, sent out the communication that's been made public. And as I've said before, I'm disappointed they're not here. I'm not surprised they're not here. I think my colleagues on the board spoke eloquently to the issues that we face with respect to our colleagues on the board who are not here today. Engagement is a significant challenge. And Al Ward's right. Frankly, I think we need a reset. I really do. You know, for too many years, people just showed up for these meetings. 6 times a year, they had to come for several hours, and then they were rewarded with tickets to football games. Folks weren't really engaged in the business of Penn State. The paradigm has changed, and we really need to have folks who are willing to provide that level of engagement, which requires an element of time. You have to commit yourself. It's not just your name, for example. Historically, we've had members who are on the board ostensibly to try to raise money. It's a different world. And Sandusky just, I think, accelerated the realization. But by the grace of God, something like that hasn't happened in other institutions. It happened at Penn State. Now hopefully we'll become a better institution for the experience in terms of the lessons that it teaches us in governance.